All right, let's go through some sales form preferences here. So come into my gear and account and settings, on down to sales, and then we have our sales form content settings here. A lot that goes into this section here, a lot of cool features. So we have our preferred invoice terms, okay? This is where you can set default terms across the board for your customers. However, whatever you have set up at the customer level will override this. So I have net 30 terms as an example set up here at the company level, but at my customer, Marjorie Adams, if I edit this customer under payment and billing, I have terms of net 15 set up for this particular customer. So when I go to create a new invoice, the default terms for the customer are filled in there. Now, if I don't have those default terms filled in, then of course it's going to pick up the company level terms that we have set up here. So there's where you can set those. It's nice to set something here, right, your default terms, preferably something smaller here, right? So due upon receipt is the default unless changed otherwise. That way something shows up on your customers at least when you set them up or when you create the invoice against them and they don't have terms set up. Preferred delivery method, of course, this is just print later. Are we going to send it snail mail or are we going to send it later? So this is, again, going to be a default at the company level. It would override at the customer level as well. So does the customer want to send them an email with their invoices, or do they want it through the mail? Shipping here, so you can see if you hover over any of the little question marks, it's really nice. You have to click on them, but it says it adds fields, date, so shipping date, tracking number field, destination, ship to address basically, and a subtotal for shipping to all sales forms. So that's really nice. So I'm going to go ahead and enable that, and we'll take a look at that on an invoice here in a second. Custom fields we can set up in a different area, so we go through that in a different video. Custom transaction numbers. So this is where you can allow, basically, so I'm going to go ahead and say save here. I come onto a new transaction. On my transaction, I don't have it set up currently to allow for custom transaction numbers, and so you don't see the ability to edit a transaction number on this screen. Okay. Now, why that's nice is because if you have the ability to edit a transaction number, you can come in here, you can create an invoice, 1,000, post that invoice. Then you can create another invoice, 1,000, print that invoice out, send it to the customer, ask them for a payment of cash, and they think that they've received an invoice, but it's not a legitimate one, right? It's not one that's actually saved in the system. So, and same on the bill side. Making the system, forcing the system to generate their own transaction numbers is actually a protection for the company, and quite nice. Now, not everybody can do it, so you can enable it, of course, as well. And since we're here, let's go ahead and take a look. So we have the shipping field that was enabled when we opened up that preference. We have the ship via, the ship date, and the tracking number, and then, of course, the total shipping, which we'll take a look at here in a minute as well, where that goes, basically. Okay, so I'll show you those all at once. Coming back into account and settings, so we enabled shipping. We talked about custom transaction numbers. I'm going to go ahead and turn it on now, so you will be able to see that field when we go in and edit. Then we have the service date. So this opens up a field at the line level. On the shipping terms, we were looking, or the shipping preference here, we were looking at fields at the header level, right, of the transaction. And then total shipping cost was also for the entire transaction. It wasn't marking a shipping cost per line of the transaction. The service date is going to be per line, so we'll take a look at that, enabling this field. Why you would turn this on, especially if you're a consulting company, or as an example, just the other day, my grandmother called me and said somebody was supposed to come out and fix the gate. She got an invoice, and the invoice did not tell her when they came out. She never saw them come out. She doesn't believe they fixed the gate. So avoid some of those conversations in the future, right? Put the service date on the line level if you need your customers to know that information. Discount. So this is going to be similar to shipping. It's going to show up at the bottom of a transaction. What is the total discount? And we'll take a look at it, but you can do an amount or percentage. And then deposit. So this is a pretty cool one as well. So this is if you are, I mean, sometimes in the construction industry, people have retainage withheld, so you can hold out some retainage amounts through this. You can also, so we've used it in a different way, a different workflow to hold that out. You can also hold it as a customer deposit, right? So it's $500. We need to take 50% down, and so you mark that $250 on there. And so we'll take a look at that here in a second as well. Then we have tips and gratuity. So turning this on, I've turned this on and off, and I have set a particular setting. It will ask you, is these tips for you or are these tips for other people? And why that matters is how they set up the tips in the chart of accounts. And so we'll take a look at the tip setup in the chart of accounts here just in a second, but this is where you enable that. It'll also ask you to enable that field on a sales receipt. Right? The expectation is if we're receiving tips that it's a cash transaction, type of transaction. So it's on the sales receipt, not on an invoice type form. Okay? So those are all the fields enabled. Let's go see what that did. So we come in here first to a new invoice. So I have my customer, I can put in a customer email. I'm not going to do all these things. There's that sends later button, right? That isn't a default. Coming across the top, we have the bill to address, the terms defaulted to the customer terms, not the company level terms, invoice date, due date, and look at this invoice number. So I have the ability to modify the invoice number if I need to. Ship via, so this is a free type, right? FedEx. Shipping date, so when are we going to be shipping it on? What is the tracking number? And all just fields, information. The more information you give to customers, the less that they're going to call you. So here's the shipping information. We have stuff that we'll talk about in a little bit, and tags we'll talk about in a little bit. So here's our service date, right? When did we come out and service your gate? What is our product? We already know that, any kind of description. And I'm going to go ahead and put in here $500 just for fun. Now down below here we have a discount percentage, or you can do a discount value. Okay, so this is going to be across the board discount. So I'm going to go ahead and give them a 10% discount. Now, we don't have any shipping on ours, but I'm going to throw in some shipping just so that you can see the end result. So we'll say $15 in shipping. And then that's $465. So I want to have a deposit of $200 on this transaction. So the balance due is going to be $265. So let me go ahead and save this. All right. And it was approved because I have that set up. That's another video. Let me go into more and our transaction journal and see what's going on behind the scenes. It's always important to understand, right? You can't just trust that the way that, you know, when you enable certain things in QuickBooks, they set up accounts and they set up the types of accounts they should be and all these things. So you still should go in and take a look at what's actually happening behind the scenes. So $265 in accounts receivable, that was the total amount due, balance due at the bottom of our transaction. We had $500 in sales, right? And sales would be a revenue account is my assumption, but we should still take a look at that. Discounts given, $50, so this should be a contra revenue account, still an income type account, but it gives them $50 back, so net of $450 in income on this transaction. We have shipping income. Okay, now some people run this as shipping income and then cost of goods sold as shipping expenses. Some people run it through as a wash account, right? So it just shows shipping and then the income and expenses run through those. I like to see income and expenses separately. Any kind of wash account, sometimes you just don't know what falls in there, right? Then down below here, we have cash on hand. So we have a defaulting, depositing that to cash on hand for the $200. And so that's where that deposit ended up going. All right. Now, if I wanted to, I could come into my settings and change, I'm sorry, not my settings. Oops, into my chart of accounts and change, right, cash on hand. Now I can edit this account. I can change it from a bank account to maybe an other current liability and rename it because this is a customer deposit, right, something like that, because really it is a customer deposit. But then you have to receive in the cash, right? So for you debits and credits people out there, generally when you have an invoice that's outstanding, you receive a customer deposit against it. The invoice is still outstanding at $500, let's just say. And then we have a $200 liability of customer deposits because if we don't complete the work, then we owe that customer back that money. Okay. However, in this case, the way that the workflow goes is it's just bypassing that customer deposit account, lowering our AR account, and giving us the cash, which is fine, right? Because in my world, or the way that it should happen, is you have a positive accounts receivable for $500. You have a positive liability for $200, which is your customer deposit, and those two offset each other to be $300. Okay. So in this situation, instead of it showing in QuickBooks Online, instead of it showing $500 in accounts receivable and $200 in customer deposits as a current liability, it just shows $300 in accounts receivable. Okay, so it kind of balances those two together, which we're used to seeing in QuickBooks. But you just have to have awareness. All right, going back into our Transaction Journal 2, we had the shipping. So let me go ahead and find the shipping income account. So in this case, shipping income is considered to be a income type account, but you have the ability to modify that as well. And then we had our discounts, right, which they do have set up, in my opinion, correctly as a contra income account. So it would have gone in as a negative income, basically. So contra income is because it's income sits regularly as a credit balance. A discount will be a debit balance, so that therefore it's contra to what a income account naturally is, right, which is a credit balance. So this is a correct way to have that set up. Now, another setting that we had talked about was the service, right? When we come in here to account and settings, turning on that service date. So it's very informational in there. So if you come into a report, as an example, maybe we do a customer aging detail report or a customer balance detail report, and I come in here to customize which columns I want to show, that service date field is not a field on here, right? I can't customize and add that column. It's not a filter field that is on here. So in your reports, even if I go in and look at transaction detail reports, so transaction detail by account or by customer, and I customize this report and I say, show me the different columns that are possible to add to this report. Service date is on this one, but not on the customer reports. So you want to make sure that you just have awareness. When we turn on these fields, be curious, figure out what's going on. That's really important. So if I come back, let me do one more report search and go to transaction detail by transaction list by customer, and I customize this, it's not one of those fields that shows up here, right? So just having awareness on where those fields, where can I report on these fields is super important. And then the last one we have is we talked about turning on the tips. So let me go into Marjorie here and do a new sales receipt transaction. All these fields are here. I can still edit the sales receipt number. All the shipping stuff is there. We have our deposit too is going to be cash on hand, so I can decide if that's a different account. Still have that service date. I'm going to put in some hours here, $100 for this. We do have the discount. We do have the shipping. I'm not going to fill those in on this transaction, but we have a tip. Now again, in the tip settings, in the very beginning, it asked me, do you want these tips for you or do you want these for employees possibly? And so that matters because when we look at our transaction journal for this, you can see that behind the scenes, what happens is cash on hand comes in, so $120 deposit to our cash. We have sales of $100, and then we have tips income of $100. So it shows up on the income statement because it's just me, so it's my income that I had to record. Now, if you had other people that were collecting tips, like you have staff as an example, then you might not want it to be called tips income because you owe that staff those tips. Sorry, let me go back into there. What I just talking and I clicked run report instead of edit. Okay, so in here, if you have staff that you owe these tips to, then rather than being an account type of other income, we would want to come in and put it in as an other current liability and call it tips payable. You should expect to see that. And down below here, we have a detail type of undistributed tips. Again, always important to know what's going on when we enable these settings, what's happening in the system automatically. QuickBooks does a great job of coaching us on what we're supposed to do. We need to think through these things.